applications are actually processed. So one thing that I've noticed is that a lot of students who are interested in succeeding in competitive admissions processes actually don't have a firm grasp of how applications are reviewed once they're in the admissions office. And I think that that's really strange. I've always sort of likened that to trying to fix a car if you don't know how an engine works. So this is how it works. There's actually a fair amount of variability between law schools. It's not as, there's pretty standard processes for college. Law school tends to be a little bit different depending on the school, but the basic kind of infrastructure of it is you submit your application, you all know that. It goes on top of a stack of applications, might be in the thousands, tens of thousands of applications long, talking about like 100,000 plus pages of reading that the admissions office needs to do. Typically, they'll only have a few admissions officers, if any. These applications are then separated. Sometimes they're separated by region. Sometimes they're just separated arbitrarily. But the important thing is that an individual admissions officer is going to be assigned to read your file. At certain schools, for example, Yale being one of them, the applications are, in addition to being screened by the admissions office, they're submitted to professors, and 3 professors rate each individual application, and they give it a score. And then if you have the, the requisite level score from each of the professors, or in the sum total, then you're admitted. And if you don't, you're deferred or rather waitlisted or rejected. But in most cases, it's not quite as involved with the professors. It's kind of a laborsome way, a cumbersome way of doing it. So the admissions officer who's assigned to your file is basically going to decide whether or not you make it to the next round. So your goal as an applicant, first and foremost, is impress that person. And so you can kind of think about it as your grades and the scores are essential to basically meeting the kind of core qualifications. And I think this is actually particularly true of the LSAT score, which has been shown to correlate pretty well with performance in the first year of law school. And in that way, the LSAT is actually quite different from other standardized tests, which don't correlate especially well with what they're supposed to correlate with. Like the SAT doesn't correlate particularly well with first-year performance in college. So the LSAT actually does measure something. It measures more or less what they intend it to measure, which is actually quite important. It's why the LSAT is so important. But the LSAT and your GPA, these are things that sort of, they get your foot in the door, but what sort of gets you through it is the remainder of the application, right? So it's sort of like those things qualify you, and then the rest of your application, your experiences, your activities, all of that, those are the things that sort of allow you to stand out and thereby increase dramatically the chances that this admissions officer pulls your application from the pile. After that, in typical admissions offices for law schools, the dean of admissions will review the top application and shape the incoming class. In some cases, there's sort of like a panel of admissions officers. In some cases, there's professors involved. That varies more considerably. But that's sort of like the basic outlay. Primary takeaway here, it's important to stand out, and it's extremely important to make a good impression on the first admissions officer, which is not something that can be accomplished solely with grades and test scores.
Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I'll wish you all the best and take care.